Howdy everybody, Dr. Andy Woods here. I'm the pastor teacher here at Sugarland Bible Church. This is Pastor's Point of View number 352. This is being released May the 2nd, 2025, and we have a prophecy update for you today here on Pastor's Point of View. There's the categories that we're going to try to look at in this session. Hoping we can get through all of them. If not, we'll postpone whatever we don't get for the next show. But we're going to be looking at the Restrainer. Some interesting information about the coming peace treaty of 7 years. The movement of our world into global religion. And then I want to bring you up to speed on some things that are happening related to Mark of the Beast technology. Let's go ahead and begin with the Restrainer. When we talk about the Restrainer, we're talking about 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 6 and 7, where the Apostle Paul says, "And you know what restrains him," being the man of lawlessness, "now, so that in his time he will be revealed. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way." So what you can expect to happen right up to the eve of the rapture is the Antichrist, the spirit of the Antichrist, will be held at bay. And I want to show you some evidence of that happening in our world. It's happening in our world largely through the institution of human government here in the United States of America. One of the greatest straitjackets that has been placed on the New World Order movement or the globalist movement is the United States Constitution, which calls for limited government in contradistinction to the maximum government that the Antichrist will usher in. And so as long as you have a functioning United States of America, you have a built-in restraint to the Antichrist's agenda. Of course, that will all change with the rapture. The restraint will be taken away. But just to show you some verses on this, notice Romans 13, verses 3 through 5. Paul the Apostle writes, "For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Then do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For it, government, is a minister of God to you for good, but if you do what is evil, be afraid. For it, or government, does not bear the sword for nothing. For it is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on the one who practices evil." So I am of the persuasion that since the inauguration of Donald J. Trump to the presidency of the United States of America, some wonderful things have been done and continue to be done to hold back the forces of evil and the forces of darkness seeking to envelop our world. That's why I found this article from Politico very, very informative. This is an April 11th article. It says, "State employees to report on one another for anti-Christian bias." And here's what the article says. It says, "The Trump administration has ordered state employees to report on any instances of coworkers displaying anti-Christian bias as part of its effort to implement a sweeping new executive order on supporting employees of the Christian faith working in the federal government." And as I read this, ask yourself, when was the last time you ever saw something like this happening in any presidential administration? The article goes on and says the department, according to a copy of an internal cable obtained by Politico, will work with an administration-wide task force to collect information involving anti-religious bias during the last presidential administration and collect examples of anti-Christian bias through anonymous employee report forms. The cable was sent out to embassies around the world under the Secretary of State Marco Rubio's name. The instructions also were released in a department-wide notice. The document says the task force, which was established by the executive order, will meet around April 22nd to discuss its initial findings. The cable encourages State Department employees to report on one another through a tip form that can be anonymous. Reports should be as detailed as possible, including names, dates, locations, example, post or domestic office where the incident occurred, the cable reads. Wow. What a breath of fresh air that is. Because normally when you get these kind of memos from prior administrations, it's report on people who are overly Christian, who are, putting a manger scene up, I guess, or a crucifix or something in their office. And now under Trump and Rubio, the whole policy has shifted. I mean, it used to be let's blow the whistle on people that weren't, wearing their mask or things like that. Now it's let's blow the whistle and turn people in related to Christian bias. So I guess turnabout is fair play. And I don't know how to describe this other than it's the work of the Restrainer through the Trump administration. Here's some more examples of the work of the Restrainer. Notice this, it says censored. Secretary Rubio has shut down the State Department censorship agency. Secretary Marco Rubio announced the shutdown of the State Department's Counter Foreign Information Manipulation and Interference Office, formerly known as the Global, notice that word, Engagement Center, GEC, a bloated $50 million operation that, instead of countering foreign trends, turned its sights on silencing the very few Americans it was meant to protect. Close quote. So that whole wing under Rubio has been shut down. And to that I just say, praise the Lord. Notice President Donald Trump is what he said during Holy Week, Easter week, leading up to Resurrection Sunday. Well, actually, I'm not quite there yet. Before I get there, notice this particular screenshot of a recent executive order. It says all welfare and food stamp recipients will now be required to pass a drug test to receive or renew their benefits. And Trump here is quoted as saying, it's time to stop giving bad people a free ride. And I just say, praise the Lord. I mean, the debate used to be, we got to provide needles for everybody. So at least when they take their drugs, they're doing it safely. Now the Trump administration is moving our country in a different direction, where if you want to receive any type of government assistance, welfare, food stamp recipients, etc., you have to be clean. Your body must be free of drugs. And so again, it's an example of a 180-degree turn. And I'm just happy to see these things transpiring in my lifetime. I never thought I would see these types of developments. As I mentioned a little earlier, notice President Trump's message on Holy Week 2025. And this is what it says. This week, Melania and I join in prayer with Christians celebrating the crucifixion and resurrection, notice this pronoun, of our, not your, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the living Son of God who conquered death, freed us, not freed you, freed us from sin and unlocked the gates of heaven for all eternity. You know, it looks to me like Trump is claiming the name of Christ through that particular presidential message. Here is something he did parallel to that around the same time on his social media platform called Truth Social. It says this, Trump writing, it says, This Holy Week, Christians around the world remember the crucifixion of God's only begotten Son, our, not your, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And on Easter Sunday, we celebrate his glorious resurrection and proclaim, as Christians have done for nearly 2,000 years, he is risen. Through the pain and sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, we saw God's boundless love and devotion to all humanity. And in that moment of his resurrection, history was forever changed with the promise of everlasting life. I mean, folks, you don't even get this kind of preaching in most churches today. And here you're getting it from the President of the United States. Last paragraph, as we approach this joyous Easter Sunday, I want to wish Christians everywhere a happy and very blessed holiday. America is a nation of believers. We need God. We want God. And with his help, we will make our nation stronger, safer, greater, more prosperous, and more united than ever before. Thank you and happy Easter! Exclamation point. And I just say to the President of the United States, Mr. President, we thank you for your public acknowledgement of the highest, holiest day on the Christian calendar, Resurrection Sunday. Do you realize, folks, what a 180 that is in terms of policy? Do you remember what Biden did on Resurrection Sunday, Easter Sunday, 2024, when he declared it Trans Day of Visibility, which was outrageous? And here the President of the United States at the time was basically substituting Resurrection Sunday for some kind of Trans Visibility Day. I remember watching Trump's social feed at the time Biden did that in 2024. And he basically said, you know what, President Biden owes the American people an apology for doing something like that. And I remember it was Trump's first term when the whole mask mandates and everything were coming down. And, everybody was under lockdown, and he said, you guys all need to go back. You guys all need to go back to normal life, and you need to go back to church. Go to church this Sunday. I can't remember the last time when I ever heard a president ever say something like that. And here he is in his second term doing largely the same thing. And, I greatly appreciate it, as I'm sure you do also. It's a 180-degree turn in these policies that we all care about related to Christianity, morality, etc. So who's trying to stop him with all of this stuff? Who's trying to stop the restrainer? Well, the one who's trying to stop the restrainer is the unelected judiciary. The unelected judiciary, whether it's rogue, conflicted judges, as we've covered at the district court level, the circuit court level, or the Supreme Court level, are trying to put handcuffs on the President of the United States for fulfilling his executive functions, such as exporting illegal gang members with rap sheets a mile long back to their own country. So notice this conflict that is taking place between these two branches of government, the judicial branch of government, unelected, and the executive branch of government, just because the executive branch is fulfilling its executive functions. Here's an article from Fox News. This is dated April the 20th, 2025. It says Alito, along with Clarence Thomas, by the way, some conservative members of the United States Supreme Court, it says Alito blasts unprecedented SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, move to halt Trump's Venezuelan deportations. Here's what the article says. Justice Samuel Alito wrote a fiery dissent against a recent Supreme Court move to halt President Trump's deportations of Venezuelan criminals under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. The decision, which was issued early Saturday morning, effectively blocks the deportations of Venezuelan migrants under the 18th century law. So what the left is trying to say is, well, because the law is old, it's invalid. And I loved Tom Homan's response to all of that. He says, you know what? The United States Constitution is even older. So if you're going to ignore this law because it's an 18th century law, maybe we should just throw out the entire United States Constitution, the Bill of Rights. And for that, along those lines, you ought to throw out the Declaration of Independence, which was written even earlier in 1776. In a decision that was also signed off on by conservative Justice Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett. Once again, Amy Coney Barrett has proven herself to be a turncoat. We all thought she was going to be a conservative constitutionalist, and she had a few decisions, signed on to a few decisions in that regard, but she's largely a 180, and now she's routinely siding with the liberal bloc of the court. In a decision that was signed off on by conservative justices Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, and I'm not going to call her a conservative justice anymore, even though this article does. The court, continuing with the article, the quote, advised the White House not to remove Venezuelans held in Texas Bluebonnet Detention Center until further order of this court. Alito disapproved of this decision, which he described as being, quote, literally in the middle of the night. That's what the Supreme Court just did to President Trump, fulfilling his normal role in the executive branch of deporting illegal alien criminals from our country. Alito says this was a wrong decision, and it was made literally in the middle of the night. Alito, in his dissent, said, quote, the court issued an unprecedented and legally questionable relief without giving the lower courts a chance to rule, without hearing from the opposing party, within 8 hours of receiving the application with dubious factual support for its order, and without providing any explanation for its order, close quote, Alito wrote. Alito goes on and says, I refuse to join the court's order because we had no good reason to think that under the circumstances issuing an order at midnight was necessary or appropriate, close quote, Alito continued. So this is a type of spiritual warfare that is going on right now in the United States of America regarding the restrainer. Trump is largely functioning as the restrainer, holding back the Antichrist's agenda, and here is the United States Supreme Court, unelected, conflicted in some cases, as are the lower courts, trying to stop the Trump agenda. And they're issuing these crazy rulings to stop him literally in the middle of the night without hearing from the other opposing party, without giving, it says it's unprecedented and legally questionable relief, without giving the lower courts a chance to rule, making these rulings within 8 hours of receiving the application with dubious factual support for its order, and just issuing an order with no explanation attached to it. This is how rogue our judiciary has become, and this is what the forces of darkness are using to stop Trump functioning as a president is supposed to function under his constitutional authority, making him largely a restrainer in the world. And so these are all things that need to be understood in a prophetic context, which is what I tried to do here. With all of that being said, let's go to our second major category, and it has to do with the treaty. There's coming a treaty of 7 years between the Antichrist and unbelieving Israel, and I believe that we are being psychologically prepared for that coming treaty. Notice, if you will, Daniel chapter 9 and verse 27, which gives us an outline of the tribulation period yet future. It says, "And he," that's Antichrist, "will make a firm covenant with the many." Now, the many is Israel. You can cross-reference that with Daniel 11, verse 33. "With the many for 1 week." Now, a week there is a week of days, a week of years, meaning an increment of 7 years. Daniel is very good at saying days. He says that, I think, in Daniel 10, 12, and 13, but here he leaves it blank, and most reputable Bible scholars understand that as a week of years, a 7-year period. But in the middle of the week, that's in the middle of the 7-year period, he, or Antichrist, will put a stop to sacrifice and offering. "And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate." So here is a graphic, if you will, describing this 7-year period. It's a period of 7 years that we call the 7-year tribulation period, and it's going to be launched by a peace treaty of some kind between the Antichrist and unbelieving Israel. Midway through that time period, the Antichrist will desecrate the rebuilt Jewish temple. And at the end of that 7-year time period, you'll have the second advent of our Lord Jesus Christ. And I believe that what is happening today on the world stage is we are being psychologically prepared to think in terms of these 7-year increments. Notice this particular article from J. Feed. It's entitled, "Report, Egypt and Qatar Push Bold 7-Year Truce in New Ceasefire Proposal." Now, as I read a little bit about this, I'm not here arguing that this is that this is the 7-year treaty that's spoken of in Daniel 9:27, but I just think it's interesting that this peace treaty that the talk of which just came out is speaking of treaties and agreements with Israel that will last 7 years. We're being psychologically prepared to think in terms of these 7-year increments, I believe, in preparation for Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. You notice that this treaty here is not for 6 years or 8 years, but exactly 7, which is what the Bible anticipates related to the end of the age. Notice what the article says. It says, "Mediators from Egypt and Qatar have put forward a new ceasefire proposal aimed at ending the ongoing war in Gaza and securing the release of hostages, according to a report by the BBC citing a senior Palestinian Arab official involved in the talks. The proposed agreement reportedly includes a ceasefire lasting between 5 to 7 years. The release of all of Israel's hostages held by Hamas in exchange for Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, a formal end to the conflict, and a complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip." Once this came out, I got a correspondence from Aaron Levarco, who works with Brandon House Worldview Weekend as an Israeli Christian, by the way, but an Israeli reporter on the ground. And this is what he texted me concerning this brand new proposal. He says, "There is a new proposal from Gaza. It's referred to by the Times of Israel and also the Times of India. This is what has been offered by Egypt and Qatar. Israel gets all of her captives back in one shot. We, Aaron being Jewish living in Israel, release all prisoners of theirs in one shot. Hamas relinquishes their rule and all authority in Gaza to another Palestinian group, and he puts this in quotes, not just quotes, but total capitalization. Capitalizes every word here in this sentence. And Gaza offers a 7-year ceasefire. And Aaron writes, did you get that last sentence? A 7-year ceasefire. Because in his mind, that also comports with something that the Antichrist is going to work out with concerning Israel yet future in Daniel 9:27. Notice this particular screenshot from X. It's somebody here writing in Arabic, speaking of this agreement that they're discussing. And he says, quote, its duration is 7 years. And one of its conditions is the laying down of arms. Egyptian sources reveal to All Arabia TV the details of an Egyptian Qatar proposal for a new truce in Gaza. So this, to me, is very fascinating because the Bible is very clear that one of the things that's going to end human history as we know it is the inauguration of the tribulation period involving a treaty between the Antichrist and unbelieving Israel for a period of 7 years. But once again, I'm not arguing that this is that. What I'm saying is Israel and the world, for that matter, is being psychologically prepared to accept and to receive 7-year covenants or 7-year peace treaties. And so I have to include information like this in a prophecy update as we talk about how the Lord is setting the stage for the return of Jesus Christ to the earth and for the prophetic scenario in general. Let's move to our third major category, and it has to do with global religion. We know that the day will come when global religion will envelop the earth. We see that in Revelation 17, verse 15. It says, he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And as we have explained many times, harlotry in the Bible, when used as a symbol, invariably speaks of false religion. And when it says that this harlot is going to have influence over peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues, track those same nouns through the book of Revelation, and what you're going to see is they always refer to influence over the globe, the planet, all of humanity. That's how those same 4 nouns are used together in the book of Revelation, chapter 5 and verse 9. So very clearly, what is predicted here is a one-world religious system. And I would argue that that system is being built. One of the people that the devil, I believe, is using to build that system is none other than King Charles. Notice this article from redstate.com, April 17th, 2025. It says, King Charles royally ticks off Christians worldwide with a bizarre, sacrilegious Easter message. Now compare the Trump message on Easter with King Charles' message. An April 17th article, here's what the article says. When taking these vows at his May 6th, 2023 coronation at Westminster Abbey, the king responded in the affirmative when asked by the Archbishop of Canterbury, will you, to the utmost of your power, maintain the laws of God and the true profession of the gospel? Will you, to the utmost of your power, maintain in the United Kingdom the Protestant Reformed religion established by law? Of course, the king at that time answered in the affirmative. That's what he would do, because that's, after all, what his mother, Queen Elizabeth, did. And ever since that point in time, the King Charles, he used to be Prince Charles, now he's King Charles. You know, I call him Charles in charge now that Elizabeth has passed. What he has done is he has tried to mix over and over again the religions of the world. And in this case, in this historic speech, he's trying to mix Christendom, Christianity, and Islam. So here's what King Charles said. This was his Easter message, using his massive platform to communicate ecumenical truth. He said, quote, "On Maundy Thursday, Jesus knelt and washed the feet of many of those who would abandon him. His humble action was a token of his love that knew no bounds or boundaries and is central to the Christian belief." So far, so good. The love he showed when he walked the earth reflected the Jewish ethic of caring for the stranger and those in need. So far, so good, since Jesus was Jewish. But then he goes on and says, and a deep human instinct echoed in Islam and other traditions in the hearts of those who seek the good of others. What did he just do there? He just mixed Christendom, Christianity, with Islam. Now, the author of this article from Red State, Terry Christoph, says this: "Let us make no mistake here. Charles used one of the most solemn days in the Christian liturgical calendar to purposely suck up to a religion that would happily wipe out Christianity if given the chance. Forget the fact that Jesus was crucified many centuries before Islam became a thing." I mean, Islam doesn't even come on the world scene until the 7th century AD. That's a good 700 years after Jesus left the earth. So don't try to mix Christianity with Islam. You cannot mix the two on that basis alone. Beyond that, they teach completely different things. They teach that actually Judas was crucified on the cross, not Jesus Christ. And when Jesus comes back, he's going to be sort of a sidekick or a lieutenant, if you will, of Muhammad, Allah, etc. That's not what the Bible teaches. You try to mix these two belief systems. One is salvation by faith alone through grace alone, and the other is a works salvation. One has messianic prophecy in it, the other doesn't have messianic prophecy in it. I mean, no matter how you try to mix these two together, it's like trying to mix oil and water. They naturally separate. But that's what King Charles is doing with these historic, influential speeches that he is making in his regal position. The article says, forget the fact that Jesus Christ was crucified many centuries before Islam, even before Islam became a thing. Islam is unquestionably contributing to the moral and societal rot that is plaguing the very kingdom over which King Charles rules. Great Britain has got some big, big problems, and judging from the king's noxious Easter message, they are loath to address them. Just last year, the 17-year-old son of Rwandan immigrants knifed to death 3 young girls who were attending a Taylor Swift-themed dance camp. When everyday Brits voiced their concern over the rise of religiously motivated crime, they were threatened with arrest. In fact, in our last show, we covered a young mother who spoke out for 4 hours. Her tweet was up on Twitter regarding what the Brits should do with the people involved in these knife attacks in terms of deportation. And she is now rotting in jail as we speak. And so here's King Charles now siding with the Muslims in this speech and trying to act like Islam and Christianity are teaching the same thing. The article goes on and says a quick glance at Charles' 2020 Ramadan messages shows nothing but slobbering praise for how Muslims responded to COVID, etc., etc., etc. So if you want an example of one world religiosity, you see it there with Prince Charles. It used to be Prince Charles. Now he's King Charles. I mean, this is a guy that's been so wrapped up in, as a prince, going back to the 90s, and even before that, I remember seeing books about him during that time period. One of them written by the late Joan Vion, calling attention to this. He's been involved in one world religiosity going way back. He was one of the key players in the Rio de Janeiro summit around 1992, which basically took the earth and made it into an object of worship under the theological concept known as Gaia. And now with Queen Elizabeth gone and Charles in charge, you can expect this movement towards one world religiosity from him to continue. Something else I want to draw your attention to is the Pope. This is a good time to talk about it because the Pope Francis, has passed away recently. But he is just another tool that the devil used to promote one world religion. In fact, I think he was used by the dark side to put sort of a spiritual veneer, a Christian veneer, if you will, over the New World Order agenda. Because the New World Order is like a three-legged stool. If you kick out one leg, the stool falls apart. You've got to have all three legs working simultaneously. There's an economic angle, a political angle to the coming New World Order of the Antichrist, and also a religious angle. David Reagan, in his Harbinger's Daily article, brings our attention to this. Notice what this particular article says. It says, Pope Francis' focus on the poor and social justice grew out of his involvement in liberation theology, which is just another way of saying Marxianity, trying to mix Christianity with Marxism, which swept the Catholic Church in Latin America during the 1960s. It proved to be a more radical form of what was called the social gospel, which captivated many mainline Protestant denominations in the United States during the 1920s. In both cases, concern for social justice ended up triumphing over evangelism. According to liberation theology, social justice theology, social gospel theology, the idea is we're going to send people to hell because we're not giving them the gospel. We're going to send people to hell on a full stomach. And David Reagan, in his April 21st, 2025 article entitled Doctrines of Demons, Pope Francis dies as the most influential and dangerous false teacher, brings these things to our attention. Another article that I would bring to your attention on this related to the Pope's agenda, which is a good thing to talk about now that the Pope has passed away. It's a good time to bring up how Satan used this man, is an article by Leo Hohmann. The title of this particular article is, if I can go that direction, skipped a couple of things there. The Leo Hohmann article. Hohmann's article is called Francis the Divider. Francis the Divider. He says, Francis the Divider is dead. Look for his successor to be portrayed as somewhat more conservative and less controversial. And I want to read a couple of sentences out of the Hohmann article. But you know what? As I was flipping my pages, I noticed a whole bunch of underlining from the Reagan article that I didn't have the opportunity to read. And so let's reverse ourselves a little bit and let's put back up, if we could, the Reagan article. So if you can go back one. Reagan says in May 2014, that's Francis, proclaimed that he would be willing to baptize aliens from Mars. Or when in July 2016, he said, I do not believe it is right to identify Islam with violence. Reagan said, let us consider some of the Pope's statements over the last 12 years. Are you ready for these? In May of 2013, Pope Francis said that atheists would go to heaven if they led good and honorable lives. In July of 2013, when asked if homosexuals could serve as priests, he replied, "If someone is gay and he searches for the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge?" In October 2013, he declared that proselytizing, that's evangelizing, is solemn nonsense. In June 2015, he proclaimed pollution to be a sin and called for an international agreement to combat global warming. In September of 2015, he slammed capitalism, the free market, in other words, calling it an economy of exclusion and inequality. He also said that capitalism is the dung of the devil. In November 2015, he proclaimed that Christians and Muslims are brothers and sisters. In June 2016, Pope Francis issued his first video. In it, he expressed the belief that all major religions are different paths to the same God. Following the shocking revelation, this video featured persons from different world religions expressing confidence in their various gods. The video then closed with the Pope expressing his belief that regardless of religious profession, we are all children of God. In October 2020, the Pope issued an encyclica in which he called on people to ditch capitalism, support open borders. By the way, he lives behind a wall. A hypocrite, in other words, continuing with the quote, and reject the traditional Christian doctrine of just war. In May 2023, he emphasized doing good as the principle that unites all humanity. He added, the Lord has redeemed all of us with the blood of Christ, not just Catholics, everyone, even the atheists, everyone. We must meet one another doing good. In December of 2023, he authorized priests to bless same-sex couples. In September 2024, he declared that those who kick out migrants are against life as much as the ones that kill babies. Reagan goes on and says he made a declaration while speaking in Singapore, September of 2024. We covered this, by the way, on our show. Specifically, he said there's only one God, and each of us has a language to arrive at God. Some are Sikh, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, and they are all different paths to God. Actually, this was nothing new for him, Reagan says. It was simply a more precise definition of what he had proclaimed with his infamous video of June 2016. What is the legacy of Pope Francis now that he has passed? Well, his legacy is he put into motion the one world religiosity. That's what all of these statements have in common. That will eventually culminate in the one world religion of the Antichrist. Now, I got a little bit ahead of myself there, so I had to retrace my steps. Now let's go to the Leo Hohmann article. I previewed it earlier. The title of it is Francis the Divider is Dead, April 21st, 2025. Here's what Leo Hohmann says about the Pope. During the peak of COVID, Pope Francis energetically enforced the closing of Catholic churches worldwide. The Pope said it was a moral obligation for all Catholics to get their shots. He was also the first real DEI Pope, speaking profusely and persistently about the need to change the Church's age-old teaching about homosexuality being a serious sin. Francis fired many conservative bishops around the world. He excommunicated the conservative anti-globalist Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano. By the way, he is someone that we've spoken of in this show. He's one of the lone voices that are anti-New World Order in the Roman Catholic Church. So, of course, Francis had to fire him. Continuing with the article from Homan, in the final analysis, Pope Francis will be remembered as a very divisive person who catered to the liberal wing of Roman Catholicism with his controversial decisions to welcome unrepentant LGBTQs into the church. He also advocated that the World Economic Forum's climate change agenda, he advocated for it, and introduced other controversial measures into the church. He gave his blessing a few years back to a pagan ceremony that took place at St. Peter's Square and was devoted to the South American fertility goddess let's see if I'm pronouncing this right, Pachamama. Like it or not, the papacy is a position of great influence in the world. Francis used his position for great evil. He shut down a planned audit of the corrupt Vatican Bank and its possible connection to the widespread illicit sex trade. He sent the pedophile Cardinal Ted McCarrick to negotiate a deal with the Chinese Communist Party that placed the final authority for choosing Chinese bishops in the hands of the corrupt communist government in Beijing. He normalized LGBTQ filth. He dismissed conservative priests and bishops, replacing them with liberal ones. He taught that there was no literal hell, and that the souls of unrepentant sinners simply disappear into nothingness. He called for unfettered migration and other hostile, illegal migrants into Western nations. So if you really want to know the truth, folks, this is the legacy of Pope Francis. I've got something here. I don't have a screenshot on this. This is from Newsweek. March the 29th, 2018, by Tom O'Connor. It says, quote, Pope Francis said the souls of sinners simply vanished after death, and were not subject to an eternity of punishment, close quote. I guess he's never read Matthew 25. I think it's around verse 46, towards the end of the chapter. I guess he's never read Luke 16, verses 19 through 21. I guess he's never read Revelation 20, verses 11 through 15. In other words, he's taking the New World Order agenda, he's rewriting the Bible, and he's using that rewritten spirituality to put the third leg on the three-legged stool into place. The spiritual veneer behind the New World Order. That's what King Charles is doing. That's what Pope Francis did. I expect the next pope, whoever he is, to probably go down the same path. You know, maybe there'll be a little, let's put a conservative in there to fool the masses. But, I mean, at the end of the day, when you look at everything that the Roman Catholic papacy has advocated, it's anti-Bible and pro-New World Order, and this is preparatory for what Revelation 17 verse 15 anticipates, involving a one-world religion. One more article on the Pope, if I can give this to you. This is from the Jerusalem Post. This is dated April the 21st, 2025. It's entitled Rewriting the Bible and Calling Israel's War Shameful. Pope Francis's changing stance on Israel. The article says this: Pope Francis became increasingly vocal in condemning Israel's war against Hamas in the months before his death, including a nativity scene featuring baby Jesus in a kippah, which was unveiled at Pope Francis's nativity scene Christmas tree inauguration in December in St. Peter's Square. This particular person being quoted says, the Pope's inauguration of a nativity scene that showed baby Jesus cradled in a Palestinian kippah is an affront to Jesus, the Bible, and the 80% of Christians who have fled Bethlehem since the Palestinian Authority took over the city. President of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, Lori Cardoza Moore, said shortly after the unveiling, "Let's be clear, the Pope can't rewrite the Bible. Jesus was from Judea, not a Palestinian. He was born to a Jewish mother in Bethlehem in Judea. There was no Palestine." Cardoza Moore continued. Pope Francis also suggested that the global community study whether Israel's military campaign in Gaza constitutes a genocide of the Palestinian people in some of his most explicit criticism of Israel last November. In excerpts published from a new forthcoming book, the pontiff said some of the international experts say what is happening in Gaza has the characteristics of genocide. We should investigate carefully to access whether this fits into the technical definition of genocide formulated by international jurists and organizations, the Pope said in excerpts published by Italian daily La Stampa, close quote. So he came up with a new Jesus. Jesus is a Palestinian. We all know how ridiculous that is, as is brought out in this article. And then the people committing the genocide are not the people coming from Gaza on October the 7th, 2023, which caused Israel's 9/11. If you look at everything on a per capita basis, maybe worse than 9/11. But the genocide, of course, is Israel going into Gaza and rooting out Hamas from Gaza. That's where the true genocide is, according to the twisted mind of this Pope. So all he did is took the anti-Israel agenda of politics and put kind of a spiritual, Christianized, and I use that word very loosely, happy face on the whole thing. Such was the activities of Pope Francis. Let me give you this article here from wokespy.com. This deals with Tim Wall's daughter, and it says Trump would have deported Jesus. She branded him an MS-13 member. So there's the brink of insanity. I guess I could put it that way. That's where these people are moving to. They're moving into the abyss. They are coming up with so much complete and total nonsense to redefine who Jesus actually is. But it's going to fit great with the Antichrist empire and the Antichrist New World Order religion, which has to have a spiritual veneer. Here's what the article says. It says the 24-year-old daughter of failed vice president candidate Tim Walz, and we all should be praising the Lord that he and Kamala did not win that election, posted a video on TikTok claiming that Jesus Christ would have been deported by the Trump administration, even suggesting that he would have been accused of being part of the deadly criminal gang MS-13. Walz appeared to be referencing a 29-year-old Garcia, the MS-13 linked illegal alien who was deported to El Salvador under the Trump administration. In the video, Walz said, "We are alive today and in the United States." Let me rephrase that or quote it correctly. If Jesus were alive today and in the United States, this administration would already have him, her grammar is so poor, it's hard to read what she says. Let me see if I can put together her sentence, just so you can see the insanity of this. Let's try it again. If Jesus were alive today in the United States, this administration would already have taken him and removed him from this country without due process. Claimed he was a member of claimed he was a member of the MS-13 gang as a way to try to justify not giving him due process, as if there is any unjustifiable reason for not giving somebody due process. Close quote. Wow. Talk about a run-on sentence. And this has to do with this man Garcia, this international gangbanger who came into our country illegally. If I understand the facts correctly, he is a wife beater. And the Trump administration desired to deport him and did deport him to Venezuela. And she is analogizing Garcia to Jesus Christ. I mean, what Jesus Christ went through is the equivalent of what Garcia went through because he was supposedly deported without due process. How in the world can any rational mind connect this monster Garcia with Jesus Christ? And yet, this is what these people on the left, these people involved in the progressive movement, they do this kind of thing all of the time. And what I want you to see is there's a reason they're doing it. They're coming up with a form of spirituality that will be very compatible with the one world religion that we read about in Revelation 17 and verse 15. I think we have a screenshot of this. Notice 2 Corinthians 11 and verse 4. Paul writes, "For if someone comes to you and preaches a Jesus other than the Jesus we preached, or if you receive a different spirit from the spirit you received, or a different gospel from the one you accepted," Paul sarcastically says, "you put up with it easily enough." I mean, biblically speaking, folks, there is a different Jesus and a different gospel. And you're seeing that different Jesus being constructed as we speak. Some say he's a Palestinian. Some say he's no different than the deported Venezuelan criminal and terrorist Garcia. Prince Charles, now King Charles, says he's no different than the Muslims. And they, it would be amazing if these people would read the book of Colossians, which very clearly tells us that Jesus was the monogenes. In fact, I preached on this Resurrection Sunday morning here at Sugarland Bible Church. Mono, alone, genos, kind. John 1 verse 14, a Greek word, two words making up one word. Mono, alone, genos, kind or species, one of a kind. Jesus is not just like the Palestinians. He's not just like the Muslims. He's not just like Garcia. He is completely and totally different. He is one of a kind. The book of Colossians tells us he's the creator. He's the Savior. He's the Lord. He is the coming King, who will be, the superlative is used, meaning the ultimate is used to describe him in Revelation 19, the King of Kings, the ultimate King, the name above all names. And it is blasphemous and insanity for these social justice warriors to make it sound like Jesus really is just a social reformer, no different than Fidel Castro. I mean, how dare these people take the true Jesus and fit him into their little tiny, silly, insane, progressive, social left, cultural Marxist agenda. I mean, it is blasphemous and it is horrific, and yet this is all necessary to prepare the world for the spirituality of the New World Order that's coming. Let me cram in, if I can, one more category, and it has to do with mark of the beast technology. And for that, we need to go to Revelation 13, 16 through 18, which is the infamous mark of the beast passage. It's a passage you know well. It says, "He causes all, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, the free and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand or their forehead. He provides that no one will be able to buy or sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name." The interesting thing about this is technology is now pushing us to a point where this kind of scenario, this cashless, digitized system that's coming, is very conceivable and very credible. This reality is coming at us so quickly, and what is sort of leading the train is the advent and innovation of modern day technology. So with that being said, let me take you to this article here, and this will be the last article that we cover. It's from the timesnownews.com, April the 23rd. It says, China debuts a gold recycling ATM that transfers cash in 30 minutes. And this is what the article says. Customers in China are queuing up to encash their jewelry after the Kinghood Group launched Shanghai's first ever gold recycling ATM. Called the Smart Gold Store, the machine located in the Global Harbor Mall transfers money to the user's bank account after weighing and smelting their gold, all within 30 minutes. According to mining.com, this ATM, is booked up until the upcoming holiday in May, the surge being driven by rising gold prices. In other words, this is very, very popular. And we have a very brief video showing you this machine in operation. And so let's go ahead and play that video at this time.
所有的东西基本上是给下一步了。对，下一步。给下一步了。对，下一步。
Pretty interesting machine. You kind of take your jewelry, gold, whatever you own that's of metallic value, you put it into this machine and it immediately does the evaluation, does the proper transfer, and it converts it into cash just like that. In fact, it's not cash. This is China. It converts it into some sort of digital number. And so this is just another example of where we are now turning in cash. Forget cash, we're turning in our valuables in order to be digitized. I call this kind of a thing a 3-for-1 in terms of Bible prophecy. First of all, this is happening in China. We know that China is prophetically significant. We've done prior broadcasts and shows on that. Secondly, it involves the scarcity of gold. Gold is becoming more and more rare and scarce, and that fulfills what's coming in Ezekiel 38 verse 13. Notice what it says. It describes the motives of the invaders of the land of Israel in the last days. It says, Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish with all of its villages will say to you, the invaders, have you assembled your company to seize plunder, to carry away silver and gold, and to take away cattle and goods, and to capture spoil? One of the reasons the nations invade Israel is to get gold. It's right there in the text. Why would they do that? Because gold is becoming scarce. People are turning in their gold for some kind of digitized number. The great haters of Israel, China and others, want gold. And third, it's moving us into a cashless, digitized type of situation where you're evaluated based on a number. Your wealth is determined by an electronic number. And that, of course, sets the stage for the social credit score system, which looks a lot to me like Revelation 13, 16, and 17, where if you don't advance the government narrative or read the right books that the government wants you to read, or you don't recycle, or you say something politically incorrect on social media, then you're locked out of the system. And that's called the social credit score system. This is how the Chicoms, the Chinese Communist government, are able to keep control over their massive, burgeoning population. They put them under the social credit score system. Can't get the business loan that you needed, can't put your kids into the best schools, can't get the passport and traveling privileges that you wanted, and you're literally put in an electronic concentration camp if you happen to misbehave. Now, you can't do that as long as people have their own wealth and can barter and trade as they wish. And as long as they're trafficking in cash, the social credit score system can't come into operation because there's a degree of privacy. But once everything becomes digitized, once you turn in your valuables for a number, then all of your transactions can be monitored, and the government can see just like that if you're stepping out of line and can retaliate against you accordingly. This is all being sold to humanity as convenience. It's not convenience, folks. It's another word that begins with C. It's control. That's what China wants. And that's ultimately what the Antichrist will want. And it's spelled out very clearly in Revelation 13, verses 16 through 17. So in my view, this gold transfer ATM, whatever we're going to call this thing, gold recycling ATM, is just another example of preparation where we're headed into a mark of the beast system. So by way of review, we covered quite a few things in this update. We talked about the Restrainer, the coming peace treaty of 7 years, global religion, and mark of the beast technology. Look forward to seeing you in our next episode of Pastor's Point of View. God bless you, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.